CEO abandoned his black architect fiancé in front of everyone. 9 years later, she returns with 3 kids and a letter of inheritance. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered like a diamond showcase, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over New York's business elite. Aurora Miles adjusted the bodice of her custom Vera Wang gown, its midnight blue fabric a stark contrast against her brown skin. Her fingers trembled slightly as she smoothed non-existent wrinkles from the silk. "You look stunning," a passing socialite offered, her eyes immediately dropping to Aurora's 3-carat engagement ring before sliding away to scan the room for more important connections. Aurora forced a smile, hyper-aware of being the only black woman in a sea of white faces. 8 months of engagement to Derek Stone had not made these events any easier. The ring on her finger, platinum band, ethically sourced diamond, was supposed to be her armor, her proof of belonging. Instead, it sometimes felt like a shackle connecting her to a world that merely tolerated her presence. 3 hours earlier, in room 714 of the Plaza, she had stood before Derek with her heart hammering against her ribs, pregnancy test clutched in her trembling hand. "I'm pregnant, Derek. We're having a baby." The silence that followed froze her blood. Derek had been adjusting his Hermes tie in the mirror, his reflection showing no immediate reaction. Then he turned, his blue eyes assessing her as if she were a property investment with unexpected structural damage. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked, his voice cool and detached. The question cut deeper than any physical blow could have. In their 8 months of engagement, Aurora had ignored the veiled comments from the Stone family about diversity and tradition. She'd dismissed the way Derek's mother examined her MIT architectural degree with pursed lips, as if the prestigious institution were somehow inferior when its credentials adorned a black woman. She'd believed love would transcend all of that. Now, standing in the ballroom, Aurora watched Derek charm a group of investors. At 29, he carried the confidence of someone born into wealth and power. The Stone Enterprises empire, worth $4.8 billion according to last month's Forbes, rested comfortably on his shoulders. His Harvard MBA had been a formality. His position as heir to the throne had been secured at birth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek's voice suddenly projected across the room, "may I have your attention for a special announcement?" The crowd of 300 hushed immediately. Aurora smiled, instinctively moving toward her fiancé. Perhaps this was his way of celebrating their news, an impulsive public embrace of their future. She'd forgive his earlier shock. Men sometimes needed time to process such life-changing information. Derek extended his hand and Aurora took it, stepping onto the small platform beside him. His palm felt cold against hers. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," Derek began, his perfect white teeth gleaming. "I needed the witness of people who truly understand the meaning of legacy." He turned toward Aurora, his eyes as chilled as the champagne in crystal flutes around the room. "Aurora has been an interesting experience for me," he continued, the slight pause causing murmurs among the crowd. "But Stone Enterprises requires a partner of appropriate caliber. A woman of her background could never adequately represent the Stone dynasty." The silence in the ballroom became absolute. Aurora felt each word like a blade sliding between her ribs. "Boston isn't ready for a black first lady in its power circles," he added, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence, though the microphone carried his words clearly. "It simply isn't." Aurora stood frozen, her brain struggling to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Not here. Not like this. "You're an obstacle to my legacy," Derek whispered, his lips close to her ear but his eyes on the crowd. "Too mediocre, too predictable, and frankly, without the necessary value." He reached for her hand, sliding the 3-carat ring from her finger. The platinum band caught the light as it fell, bouncing once on the marble floor with a sound that echoed in Aurora's mind like a gunshot. Silent tears tracked down her cheeks as she instinctively placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. Only one person noticed the gesture. 82-year-old Eleanor Stone, Derek's grandmother, watching from the corner of the room with eagle eyes that missed nothing. 3 hours later, Aurora sat on the floor of her tiny Brooklyn apartment, still wearing the Vera Wang gown. The dress had been a splurge, 3-month savings from her architectural internship. Now it pooled around her like spilled ink, a reminder of her naivety. Her MIT diploma hung on the wall, seeming to mock her ambitious dreams. The scholarship she'd fought for, the prestigious internships she'd secured through relentless networking and talent, all of it suddenly felt meaningless. Her bank account showed a balance of $812. The rent was due in 2 weeks. Aurora pulled out her phone and dialed her supervisor at Anderson Architects, where she'd been interning for the past 6 months. She'd need extra hours, anything to build up her savings before the baby came. The following Monday, Aurora walked into the Anderson Architects' office to find her desk already cleared. Her supervisor, James Anderson himself, avoided her eyes as he explained, "I'm sorry, Aurora. It's a conflict of interest." "Conflict of interest?" she repeated, clutching her portfolio case. "Stone Enterprises represents 40% of our contracts," he said, finally meeting her gaze with uncomfortable honesty. "We can't afford to lose them." "I understand," she replied, her voice hollow. She understood perfectly. She had become toxic by association, or rather, by rejection. 3 months later, Aurora worked 2 jobs, receptionist at a medical office during the day and freelance draftswoman at night. Her small apartment was now cluttered with architectural sketches and pregnancy books. Her belly had begun to show, and the news from her doctor had been both miraculous and terrifying. Triplets. The medical bills for a high-risk triplet pregnancy accumulated faster than she could keep up. Each ultrasound brought joy at seeing 3 healthy heartbeats and dread at the mounting costs. Aurora had stopped answering calls from unknown numbers, knowing they were likely debt collectors. The knock on her door one Tuesday evening was unexpected. Aurora peered through the peephole, then stepped back in shock before slowly opening the door. Eleanor Stone stood in the hallway, leaning on an ivory-handled cane. Despite her age, she maintained the regal posture that had intimidated New York society for decades. Her silver hair was impeccably styled, her Chanel suit unwrinkled despite the taxi ride to Brooklyn. "May I come in?" the elderly woman asked, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. Aurora wordlessly stepped aside. Eleanor entered, her sharp eyes taking in the small apartment with its second-hand furniture and walls covered in architectural drawings. "My grandson is a fool," Eleanor declared, settling herself on Aurora's worn sofa. The Stones built an empire by recognizing value where others failed to see it. Aurora remained standing, one hand protectively over her growing belly. "With all due respect, Mrs. Stone, why are you here?" Eleanor reached into her purse and withdrew a checkbook. "I'm here to make an investment." "I don't want your charity," Aurora replied instantly. "Charity?" Eleanor scoffed. "Young woman, I haven't built a fortune by giving handouts. I'm offering you seed capital for your own architectural firm." She wrote a check with steady hands, then held it out. $250,000, a proper starting investment. Aurora didn't take it. "Why would you do this?" "Because you have what my grandson lacks: vision, determination, and the hunger that comes from having something to prove." Eleanor placed the check on the coffee table. "But there's one condition." "What condition?" "Derek must never know about the children or this investment." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "This is your chance to prove he was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong." Aurora stared at the check, her mind racing through possibilities she'd thought forever closed to her. 6 months later, in a delivery room filled with medical staff prepared for complicated triplet birth, Aurora held on to consciousness through waves of pain and exhaustion. After 26 hours of labor, she heard the first cry, then the second, then the third, 3 perfect boys with caramel skin and identical honey-colored eyes. That night, alone in her hospital room with 3 tiny infants sleeping in bassinets beside her bed, Aurora made a solemn oath. "Augustus, Benjamin, and Charles," she whispered, touching each small head gently. "You will never know the rejection I experienced, and one day he will see what he threw away." As she signed the agreement with Eleanor, Aurora couldn't possibly imagine that in 9 years she would command a billion-dollar empire, and Derek Stone would be merely a footnote in her success story. As Aurora signed the agreement with Eleanor, accepting the seed money that would change her life's trajectory, she couldn't possibly have known just how difficult the path ahead would be. The weight of 3 new lives inside her meant that every decision now carried triple the consequence. The morning sickness that plagued her first trimester wasn't just morning sickness. It was an all-day, relentless assault that left her depleted and hollow. Aurora knelt on the cold tile floor of the medical clinic's bathroom, her uniform stretched tight across her growing belly as she emptied what little breakfast she'd managed to consume. She heard a knock on the door. "Aurora? Dr. Patel needs those files for his 9:30 appointment," called the office manager. "Coming," she replied, her voice raspy. She rinsed her mouth, straightened her uniform, and plastered on the professional smile that had become her armor. Working as a receptionist at Bayside Medical Associates paid just enough to cover her rent, but did little for the mounting medical bills. Her pregnancy was classified as high risk, words that struck fear not just in her heart, but in her wallet. 3 babies meant 3 times the monitoring, 3 times the ultrasounds, 3 times the worry. 2 weeks later, Aurora sat in Dr. Reyna's office, watching the ultrasound monitor with tears streaming down her face. 3 distinct heartbeats pulsed on the screen, each one perfect, each one a miracle. "They're developing beautifully," Dr. Reyna said, smiling. "Each baby is right on track for 15 weeks. That's remarkable for triplets." Aurora squeezed her own hand, painfully aware of the empty space beside her where a supportive partner should have been. Are they really okay?" "More than okay. But Aurora, you need to take care of yourself too. Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like." Later that evening, Aurora sat at her makeshift drafting table, a door balanced on 2 filing cabinets, working on freelance architectural drawings. Eleanor's investment remained untouched in a separate account. That money was sacred, meant for building her firm once the babies arrived. For now, she scraped by on her receptionist salary and whatever drafting work she could secure after hours. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Monthly check-in. How are you feeling? Need anything?" Eleanor's visits were always discreet, always careful. The Stone family matriarch took her secrecy seriously, arriving in nondescript cars, never leaving a paper trail. Their arrangement was clear. Derek would never know about his children or his grandmother's investment in Aurora's future. The following Saturday, Aurora ventured into an upscale baby boutique on 5th Avenue, drawn by their window display of nursery furniture. She needed 3 of everything: 3 cribs, 3 car seats, 3 high chairs. But perhaps she could find floor models or display items at a discount. "Can I help you find something?" asked a blonde saleswoman, her eyes performing a quick assessment of Aurora's simple maternity dress and worn sneakers. "I'm looking for cribs," Aurora said, straightening her shoulders. 3, actually." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Perhaps I can direct you to our budget-friendly options? Or maybe our sister store in Queens would be more suitable for your needs." Aurora felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "Actually, I'd like to see your safest models regardless of price point. Safety ratings are my priority." She left the store empty-handed, another subtle rejection added to the growing collection. Back in her apartment, she ordered 3 basic cribs online, calculating delivery dates against her due date, hoping they would arrive in time. As her second trimester progressed, the stack of medical bills grew more intimidating. High-risk pregnancy, multiple gestation, advanced monitoring required. Each phrase on the invoices represented thousands of dollars that Aurora simply didn't have. In her 6th month, disaster struck. Lightheaded from skipping lunch to finish an urgent drafting project, Aurora fainted at the reception desk. She awoke to concerned faces and an ambulance on the way. Severe dehydration and exhaustion, the ER doctor pronounced hours later. Ms. Miles, with a triplet pregnancy, you absolutely cannot push yourself this way. I'm ordering complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Aurora's heart sank. Bed rest meant no work at the clinic. No work meant no income. I can't afford to stop working, she whispered. You can't afford not to, the doctor replied firmly. Those 3 babies are depending on you. The next 2 months transformed Aurora's tiny apartment into a combination bedroom-office nursery. Her bed became her workstation, her laptop balanced on her enormous belly as she drafted plans for small residential projects. She arranged client calls during hours when her morning sickness subsided, masking her circumstances with professional language and impeccable designs. Eleanor visited more frequently now, though still with the utmost discretion. She brought premium prenatal vitamins, books on childcare, and practical advice delivered with aristocratic bluntness. You'll need help after they're born, Eleanor stated during one visit, eyeing Aurora's solitary setup. I've arranged for a part-time nurse for the first 3 months, someone discreet with triplet experience. I can't accept, Aurora began. It's not charity, it's practicality, Eleanor cut her off. Even with my resources, raising 1 child alone nearly broke me after my husband died. 3 simultaneously? You'll need tactical support. At 30 weeks, the first contraction hit Aurora like a bolt of lightning. Too early. Much too early. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911, fear making her voice shake. Triplet pregnancy. 30 weeks. Living alone. Please hurry. The hospital corridor was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Blood pressure dropping. Need more fluids. Prepare for emergency C-section. Aurora had never felt more alone than in that moment, strapped to a gurney, terrified for her babies with no hand to hold. Stay with us, Ms. Miles, a nurse urged, squeezing her arm. Your babies need you to be strong now. The operating room was cold and sterile. Aurora struggled to stay conscious through waves of fear and medication. Then, piercing through the haze, came the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. A tiny, indignant cry, followed by another, then a third. 3 healthy boys, the doctor announced, genuine surprise in his voice. Remarkably good weights for triplets at 30 weeks. While Aurora recovered in her hospital room, a figure appeared in the doorway. Eleanor Stone, looking uncharacteristically emotional as she gazed through the nursery window at 3 tiny infants. They have the stone eyes, she whispered when she thought Aurora was sleeping. Those unmistakable honey eyes. 2 weeks later, Aurora brought her sons home to the apartment she'd managed to rearrange during her hospital stay. Augustus, Benjamin, and Charles, named after architects who had built lasting legacies from humble beginnings. The nurses exchanged concerned glances as they helped settle the babies. You're alone with all 3? One asked gently. No family coming to help? I have everything I need, Aurora answered, her exhaustion masked by determination. The first night alone with the triplets was a baptism by fire. As one baby settled, another would wake, feeding 3 newborns, changing 3 sets of diapers, soothing 3 different cries. It was overwhelming in its relentlessness. Aurora moved through it like a sleepwalker, functioning on instinct and determination. During one rare moment of quiet, all 3 babies asleep in their cribs, Aurora collapsed into her single chair. Her eyes fell on the stack of business books beside her bed, volumes on entrepreneurship, architectural firm management, marketing strategies that she'd been studying during pregnancy. She reached for the top book, forcing her exhausted eyes to focus on the pages. While her babies slept, she studied. While they nursed, she researched. While they napped, she drafted business plans. Eleanor's investment would not go to waste. Every moment was preparation for the empire she would build. As weeks turned to months, Aurora developed systems for everything. Each baby had color-coded bottles, clothing, and pacifiers. She created spreadsheets for feeding schedules, development milestones, and business plans. Sleep became a luxury, showering a rare indulgence, but her determination never wavered. One night, watching her 3 sons sleeping peacefully in their cribs, Aurora made a solemn vow. Augustus, Benjamin, and Charles, you will never know the rejection I experienced, and one day he will see what he threw away. Embalming her 3 sons that night, Aurora couldn't have predicted that in just 9 years, she would be invited to receive the same architectural award that Derek had once said she would never achieve. While Aurora held her 3 newborn sons that night, making her solemn vow, she couldn't have imagined the brutal path that lay ahead. The journey from abandoned fiancé to successful entrepreneur would test every fiber of her being. 3 months after bringing the triplets home, Aurora sat at her office, a small desk wedged into the corner of her living room, surrounded by 3 infant seats strategically positioned so she could rock each one with her foot while typing. Architectural plans were spread across the surface, dotted with formula stains and sticky notes. The babies, now 12 weeks old, dozed in synchronized slumber, a rare miracle she'd learned to capitalize on. The desk phone rang, jolting her from concentration. Aurora lunged to answer before the sound could wake the triplets. "Miles Design," she answered, adopting the professional tone she'd practiced for weeks. "Is this some kind of home business?" The male voice on the other end sounded immediately dismissive. "This is Aurora Miles, founder and principal architect," she replied, ignoring the crying that had now started from Augustus's seat. "How may I help you?" "We were looking for a professional firm. Sorry to have bothered you." The line went dead before she could respond. Aurora sighed, gently lifting Augustus while reaching for his bottle. This was her 23rd rejection this month. Eleanor's investment remained largely untouched in her business account. Aurora was determined to launch properly, not rush into failure. 4 weeks later, Aurora prepared for her first real investor meeting. She'd arranged for her elderly neighbor to watch the babies for 2 hours, an expense she could barely afford, but a necessity for this opportunity. Standing before the mirror in her one professional outfit, a navy pantsuit she'd bought secondhand and tailored herself to hide the lingering signs of her pregnancy, Aurora practiced her pitch one final time. The meeting was held in a gleaming midtown conference room, its floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the very skyline Aurora dreamed of transforming. 5 men in expensive suits sat around a polished table, their expressions ranging from bored to skeptical as she set up her presentation. "Gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity," Aurora began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Miles' architectural innovation offers a revolutionary approach to urban energy efficiency." "Excuse me," interrupted the oldest man, not bothering to check her portfolio. "Do those babies I hear in the background belong to you?" Aurora froze. In her haste, she'd forgotten to silence her phone, which was streaming the triplets' nursery camera, her way of monitoring them during rare absences. "Yes, they're my sons," she answered, quickly silencing the device. "As I was saying about the energy efficiency, how old are they?" asked another investor, his tone softening slightly. 4 months. The men exchanged looks. The oldest leaned forward. "Perhaps when your children are in school, you can pursue this more seriously, dear. Architecture isn't exactly a part-time profession." Aurora gathered her materials with trembling hands, humiliation burning in her chest. "Thank you for your time," she managed, pride keeping her voice from breaking. That evening, as she fed the triplets their bedtime bottles, tears silently tracked down her face. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the 3 little boys who depended entirely on her. "I will not give up," she whispered fiercely to Augustus, who gazed at her with those unmistakable honey-colored eyes. "They'll see. We'll make them all see." By the time the triplets turned 1, Aurora had established a rigorous routine. She worked from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. on architectural designs, cared for the babies from 7 a.m. until their afternoon nap, worked again while they slept, then spent evenings on their development activities before starting the cycle again. She survived on 4 hours of sleep, broken into fragments. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. After weeks of calculations, Aurora finalized a design for a revolutionary energy efficiency system that could reduce a building's consumption by up to 40%. The mathematics were elegant, the application practical. This wasn't just a good idea, it was potentially industry-changing. 3 months and 12 rejections later, Aurora stood in the lobby of Thornton Construction, clutching her portfolio and trying not to look as desperate as she felt. The triplets, now 16 months old, were with a babysitter she could barely afford for these 3 crucial hours. As she waited for her appointment, Aurora's trained eye noticed something alarming. A pattern of hairline cracks in the ceiling's support structure, barely visible but unmistakable to someone with her education. When James Thornton finally appeared, his handshake was perfunctory. "I've got 15 minutes, Ms. Miles." "Mr. Thornton, before we begin..." Aurora hesitated, then decided to trust her instincts. "There's a structural issue in your lobby ceiling. Those fracture patterns suggest stress on the main support beam." Thornton's expression hardened. "We have a team of engineers who maintain this building, Ms. Miles. I didn't agree to meet for an impromptu inspection." "Of course, I apologize," she replied, opening her portfolio. "About my energy efficiency proposal." "I think we're done here," Thornton interrupted. "We don't need unsolicited advice about our building, and frankly, these designs seem more theoretical than practical. Best of luck with your endeavors." As security escorted her to the exit, Aurora felt the familiar sting of dismissal. Just another day, just another rejection. The pattern had become so predictable she could almost laugh, if it weren't for the 3 little boys waiting at home, counting on her to succeed. 2 weeks later, Aurora's phone rang while she was helping the triplets stack blocks on the living room floor. Benjamin had shown an early talent for structural design, creating towers that defied the expectations of his age group. "Ms. Miles, James Thornton here." The voice sounded different, humbled perhaps. "There's been an incident at our headquarters." Aurora's heart raced. "Is everyone all right?" "Yes, thankfully. A section of the lobby ceiling collapsed early this morning before business hours." There was a pause. "Exactly where you pointed out those fractures." The meeting that followed changed everything. Seated in the temporary conference room of Thornton Construction, Aurora presented her energy efficiency system to a now captive audience. "This would reduce your energy costs by 42%? Thornton asked, eyes wide as he reviewed her calculations. "Conservatively, yes. We might achieve more in practice." "And you developed this while raising triplets alone?" The question came from Thornton's head engineer, a woman in her 50s who had remained silent until now. Aurora straightened. "I developed it because of my children. They deserve a mother who creates lasting change." 2 days later, Aurora signed her first major contract, $1.2 million to redesign the energy systems of 3 Thornton properties. With shaking hands, she deposited the first check, finally beginning to draw on Eleanor's seed money to expand proper office space and hire her first 2 employees. That evening, Aurora led her sons through a spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. "This is just the beginning, my princes," she told them, watching with joy as they explored their new home. "This room is for you 3, she explained, showing them the bright bedroom with built-in beds she'd designed herself. "And this," she opened another door, "is Mommy's office, where I build our future." Over the next year, Aurora's reputation grew steadily. The Thornton projects exceeded expectations, reducing energy costs by 47%, 5 points above her conservative estimate. Architectural journals began mentioning her innovative approach, and small contracts turned into medium-sized opportunities. By the time the triplets started preschool at age 4, Aurora had expanded to a proper office in Brooklyn with 5 full-time employees. She'd established a routine that allowed her to pick up the boys each afternoon, bringing them to the office where a designated corner held drawing tables, books, and educational toys. "Ms. Miles?" her assistant called one afternoon as Aurora helped Charles with a history book about famous buildings. "The Thornton construction report came in. They want exclusivity on your technology." Aurora smiled, watching her sons absorbed in their activities. Augustus methodically organized blocks by size and color before building, explaining to his brother that this system was more efficient for construction. Benjamin filled page after page with building designs that defied conventional expectations. Charles memorized facts about architectural history that amazed even Aurora's professional colleagues. The first major magazine feature came 6 months later, a small but significant mention in Architectural Digest, "Newcomer Revolutionizes Energy Efficiency." The article included a modest photo of Aurora standing before her latest project. That evening, in the Stone Enterprises executive office, Derek Stone flipped through the latest industry publications. His eyes briefly caught on Aurora's photo, lingering for just a moment on the familiar face that had somehow changed. Stronger now, more confident. But the name registered nothing in his memory. Aurora Miles was simply another architect, not the woman he'd once discarded. With casual indifference, he tossed the magazine into his wastebasket and continued with his day. While Aurora carefully preserved the magazine with her first significant mention, she couldn't have known that in just 5 years, Derek would be obsessively studying every word written about her. While Aurora carefully preserved the magazine with her first significant mention, she couldn't have known that in just 5 years, Derek would be obsessively studying every word written about her. For now, though, her focus remained singular, expanding her growing firm while raising 3 exceptional boys. With the triplets now settled in preschool, Aurora established a more structured operation at Miles Architectural Innovation. Her small Brooklyn office hummed with the energy of 5 dedicated employees, each personally vetted by Aurora, not just for talent, but for their belief in her vision of sustainable architecture. "Ms. Miles, the Brooklyn Public Library Board called again," her assistant announced one morning, poking her head into Aurora's glass-walled office. "They're interested in your proposal but want to know if the energy savings projections are actually achievable." Aurora smiled, glancing at the clock. 3 hours until she needed to pick up the boys. "Schedule a presentation for next Tuesday. I'll show them exactly how achievable 45% energy reduction is." The following week, Aurora stood before the Brooklyn Public Library Board, 7 men and 2 women, all regarding her with the polite skepticism she'd grown accustomed to. As the only black woman in the wood-paneled room, she'd worn her most professional navy suit, hair pulled back in a sleek bun. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, distributing comprehensive portfolios, "the library currently spends $612,000 annually on energy costs. My redesign will reduce that by 45% minimum, saving you at least $275,000 each year." An older board member peered over his glasses. "Those numbers sound exaggerated, Ms. Miles. Our consultants suggested 15% would be ambitious." Aurora didn't flinch. "Your consultants are using outdated models. My technology has already achieved 47% reduction at the Thornton properties. I've included their complete energy consumption reports in your packets." The data spoke volumes. By meeting's end, Aurora had secured the Brooklyn Library redesign, a $7 million contract that would showcase her innovations in a beloved public building. This wasn't just a professional milestone, it was validation. As Aurora expanded her company, she also refined her carefully constructed narrative about the triplets' father. One evening, while helping them with simple math exercises at their kitchen table, Augustus looked up suddenly. "Mommy, Tyler at school says everyone has a daddy. Where's our daddy?" Aurora set down her pencil, heart racing. She'd prepared for this moment but hadn't expected it so soon. Benjamin and Charles immediately abandoned their worksheets, identical honey-colored eyes fixed on her face. "Your father," she began carefully, "wasn't ready to be a daddy when you were born." "Didn't he want us?" Benjamin asked, his artistic sensitivity making him particularly vulnerable to rejection. Aurora chose her words with precision. "Your father made choices that showed he wasn't prepared for the responsibility of children. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It reflects on his choices, not on your value." "Will we ever meet him?" Charles, always focused on historical contexts, wanted concrete information. "Perhaps someday, when you're older. But remember this, a family isn't defined by who's missing, but by who stays and loves you every day." That night, after tucking them into bed, Aurora sat at her desk reviewing contracts until 2 in the morning. She would build something so magnificent that her sons would never doubt their worth, regardless of their father's absence. The library renovation became Aurora's showcase project. She personally supervised every detail, often bringing the boys to the site on weekends. They wore miniature hard hats, asking surprisingly insightful questions about structural supports and energy flow. "Mommy, why does this wall have special glass?" Augustus asked, pointing to the southern exposure. "It's called photovoltaic glass. It captures sunlight and turns it into electricity," Aurora explained. "Like magic?" Benjamin's eyes widened. "Like science," Charles corrected seriously. "Science is better than magic because it's real." Aurora smiled, watching her 5-year-olds absorb concepts many adults struggled to understand. Augustus already showed remarkable aptitude for numbers and efficiency, organizing his toys and books with systematic precision. Benjamin filled sketchbooks with increasingly sophisticated building designs, some impossible but all beautiful. Charles memorized architectural facts with photographic accuracy, reciting construction dates and designer names of buildings they passed. On days when the boys accompanied her to the office, clients often did double takes at the 3 identical children quietly working at their special corner table. More than once, Aurora caught potential investors watching the triplets with fascination before signing contracts more readily than expected. Their presence wasn't a liability as she'd once feared. The boys had become living proof of her exceptional management skills. "If she can raise identical triplets while building this company," she overheard one client whisper, "imagine what she can accomplish with our project." One Tuesday afternoon, a discreet town car parked a block from the boys' preschool. Eleanor Stone, now 86 but still formidable despite requiring a walking cane, watched from the back seat as Aurora collected her grandsons. "The one organizing the other children's backpacks must be Augustus," Eleanor murmured to her driver. "Always the manager." The following weekend, Eleanor arrived at Aurora's apartment with educational gifts: advanced mathematics workbooks for Augustus, professional-grade drawing supplies for Benjamin, and architectural history books for Charles. "They're thriving," Eleanor observed, watching the boys immediately gravitate to their perfectly chosen presents. "Derek would be—" "Please," Aurora interrupted quietly. "We don't speak that name here." Eleanor nodded, understanding the boundary. "They have stone eyes, but they have your determination. That combination will make them unstoppable." The Brooklyn Public Library renovation completed on schedule and under budget, a rarity in architectural projects. On opening day, Aurora stood proudly as reporters documented the dramatic transformation. The building had maintained its historic character while incorporating cutting-edge sustainability features hidden elegantly within the original structure. The renovation reduces energy consumption by 78%, the library director announced to assembled press. "Ms. Miles has accomplished what multiple consultants told us was impossible." That evening, Aurora carefully cut out the newspaper headline, "Revolutionary Architect Transforms Brooklyn Landmark." The accompanying photo showed her standing confidently before the renovated building, the triplets smiling beside her at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "Why are you saving that, Mommy?" Benjamin asked, peering over her shoulder. "Because it's important to remember our accomplishments," she explained. "Every building we transform helps create a better world for you three." The library's success brought a flood of new opportunities. Aurora expanded her team to 15 employees and moved the firm to larger offices in downtown Brooklyn. Her patented energy efficiency system attracted attention from developers nationwide, and she carefully selected projects that would showcase her innovations while maintaining her core values. When the triplets turned 6, Aurora enrolled them in an exclusive private school known for nurturing gifted children. Though tuition strained her still-growing company's resources, she prioritized their education above all else. "Remember," she told them on their first day, straightening their matching navy blazers, "being at this school is a privilege. It comes with responsibility to work hard and help others." "Like you do with your buildings, Mommy?" Charles asked. "Exactly like that," she smiled. "We build things that matter." As Aurora's reputation grew, she maintained strict boundaries between her professional and personal lives. The triplets rarely appeared in publicity materials, and she declined most media interviews, focusing on her status as a single mother. Her work would speak for itself without leveraging her personal story. In his luxurious Boston office, Derek Stone caught a glimpse of an architectural journal on his assistant's desk. The cover featured Aurora standing confidently before the Brooklyn Public Library, arms crossed, expression determined. Though her name rang no immediate bells, Aurora Miles was not the name he'd known her by. Something about her stance triggered a distant memory. "May I see that?" he asked, reaching for the magazine. His assistant handed it over. "Fascinating article about sustainable architecture. This woman's revolutionizing the field." Derek flipped to the feature, scanning quickly until he found her biography. Aurora Miles, MIT graduate and founder of Miles Architectural Innovation. The magazine slipped from his fingers, landing in the wastebasket beside his desk. Without retrieving it, he turned back to his computer, dismissing the momentary discomfort. After all, Aurora was just another architect he'd never met, not someone who had once meant something to him. While Aurora placed the framed newspaper clipping of her first major headline in her growing collection of achievements, she had no idea that in just 5 years Derek would be studying every word written about her with obsessive attention. While Aurora placed the framed newspaper clipping of her first major headline in her growing collection of achievements, she had no idea that in just 5 years Derek would be studying every word written about her with obsessive attention. For now, her focus remained singular, transforming Miles Architectural Innovation from a promising startup into an industry powerhouse. 3 years after the Brooklyn Library breakthrough, Aurora stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new Manhattan headquarters, gazing at the skyline she was gradually reshaping. The 42nd floor office space gleamed with sustainable materials and cutting-edge design, a physical manifestation of MAI's philosophy. "Ms. Miles, the Chicago team is ready for your video conference," her executive assistant announced, tablet in hand. "They've finalized the renderings for the medical center project." Aurora nodded, smoothing her tailored Armani suit, a recent splurge to mark her 36th birthday. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." The Chicago Medical Center represented a monumental leap, a $180 million contract to redesign the entire hospital complex with MAI's proprietary sustainability systems. What had begun with the Brooklyn Library had expanded exponentially, with projects now spanning 3 major cities. In the sleek conference room, Aurora addressed her team of 75 employees spread across New York, Chicago, and their newest office in San Francisco. On screen, architects and engineers presented innovative solutions for the hospital's unique challenges. The North Wing redesign reduces energy consumption by 56% while improving natural light in patient recovery rooms, explained her Chicago director. We've incorporated healing garden elements as you suggested." "Excellent work," Aurora replied, making notes. "Let's push for 60% reduction. The technology can handle it." After the meeting, Aurora checked her watch. 4:30, just enough time to prepare for her TED Talk rehearsal. In 3 days, she would present Sustainable Architecture, Building a Better Future at the renowned conference. The backstage anxiety was already building, but she channeled it into preparation. "This isn't just about buildings," she practiced later that evening, standing before her bedroom mirror. "It's about creating spaces where every person feels they belong, where resources are conserved, where communities thrive." Her phone chimed with her daily reminder: school pickup in 15 minutes. No matter how busy her schedule became, Aurora prioritized collecting the triplets herself 3 days a week. The boys, now 7, burst from their elite private school with boundless energy. Augustus carried an additional folder labeled Financial Club. Benjamin clutched his ever-present sketchbook. Charles hugged a new architectural history book to his chest. "Mommy!" they called in near-perfect unison, rushing toward her. In the spacious Tribeca apartment they now called home, each boy had a bedroom designed to nurture his specific interests. Augustus's room featured a miniature trading desk where he tracked simple stocks and practiced mathematics. Benjamin's space resembled a studio, with drafting table and walls covered in his increasingly sophisticated designs. Charles surrounded himself with architectural models and history books organized chronologically. "How was school today?" Aurora asked, preparing their afternoon snack in the gleaming kitchen. "My teacher says I should skip to 4th grade math," Augustus reported matter-of-factly. "And Mommy, I was thinking, your company should expand to the West Coast. The sustainability market there is growing 12% faster than the East." Aurora suppressed a smile at her 7-year-old financial analyst. "What a coincidence! We're actually exploring Seattle opportunities next month." Benjamin looked up from his sketchbook. "Can I show you my new design? It's a building shaped like a spiral seashell that collects rainwater." "Of course," Aurora examined the surprisingly detailed drawing. "This is remarkable, Benjamin. The water collection system actually makes engineering sense." Later that evening, while the boys completed homework, Aurora reviewed a substantial acquisition offer that had arrived by courier. $400 million from a major development corporation for majority ownership of MAI. When her financial advisor called, excitement evident in his voice, Aurora remained calm. "I'm declining the offer. Ms. Miles, please reconsider," he urged. $400 million is an acknowledgement of what we've built," she interrupted. "Not a reason to sell. I didn't create MAI to hand it over once it became valuable. I built it to transform the industry." The following morning, Aurora found herself on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. MAI revolutionizes sustainable construction, with a photograph of her examining blueprints at a construction site. The article praised her innovations and noted the company's exceptional growth trajectory. In a luxurious senior living facility overlooking Central Park, Eleanor Stone, now 90 and using a wheelchair, secretly attended a public lecture Aurora gave at Columbia University. From the back row, Eleanor watched with tears of pride as her investment bore fruit beyond imagination. The triplets sat in the front row, backs straight, absorbing their mother's words about architectural responsibility. "My boys," Eleanor whispered to herself, "what magnificent men you'll become." That weekend, Aurora took the boys on the subway to visit a community center MAI had redesigned pro bono in the Bronx. "Why are we taking the subway when we could use a car service?" Augustus asked, always practical about efficiency. Aurora looked at her sons seriously. "Because privilege should never separate us from the communities we serve. The subway connects us to the real city, to the people who will use the buildings we design." The boys nodded, absorbing another lesson in their mother's careful education about wealth and responsibility. 2 weeks later, Aurora sat alone in her home office, staring at an official envelope bearing the Pritzker Prize logo, architecture's highest honor. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the formal notification that she had been selected as this year's laureate. "Mom," Charles called, knocking on her door. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Aurora looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Not a ghost, sweetheart. A dream coming true." The triplets erupted in cheers when she shared the news, leaping around her home office with unrestrained joy. "The Pritzker Prize, that's the biggest one," Charles exclaimed, architectural encyclopedia that he was. "Will we get to attend the ceremony?" Benjamin asked, already envisioning the grand venue. "Of course," Aurora promised. "This belongs to all of us." The following week, Aurora sat for her first Forbes interview, the magazine planning a cover feature titled, "How a Single Mother of Triplets Built an Architectural Empire in 7 Years." "Many would consider raising triplets alone a full-time job," the interviewer noted. "Yet you've built a company valued at nearly $1 billion simultaneously. What's your secret?" Aurora smiled, thinking of the nights spent working while the boys slept, the presentations rehearsed while cooking dinner, the unwavering focus that necessity had forged in her. "There's no secret," she replied. "When failure isn't an option, you find a way forward." As Aurora prepared for her Pritzker acceptance, across town in the Stone Enterprises headquarters, Derek faced a boardroom of increasingly concerned executives. PowerPoint slides displayed declining revenue graphs and market share losses. "Mr. Stone, our Boston waterfront project is $15 million over budget," reported the CFO tensely, "and we've lost the Minneapolis contract entirely." Derek loosened his tie, fatigue evident on his face. The company that had once seemed untouchable was now struggling to maintain its position. For the Pritzker ceremony, Aurora selected a gown from an emerging black designer, a flowing creation in architectural lines and bold cobalt blue. The triplets wore custom-tailored suits, miniature versions of powerful executives. Standing at the podium, glass award glinting in the spotlight, Aurora delivered the speech she'd been mentally composing for years. "True architecture isn't about erecting walls," she said, voice steady with conviction. "It's about creating spaces where all people can thrive, regardless of background or circumstance. Buildings should lift people up, not shut them out." The following morning, the New York Times featured a prominent headline, "Aurora Miles, the new face of American architecture." In a small sidebar on the business page, a brief note mentioned, "Continuing troubles at Stone Enterprises." Aurora carefully framed the Times article, adding it to her wall of achievements. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages, including a discreet text from Eleanor. "Perfectly executed, he's finally noticed." Holding the prestigious Pritzker Prize, Aurora couldn't know that in exactly 2 years she would face Derek Stone again, but this time she would have the power to destroy him with a single word. Holding the prestigious Pritzker Prize, Aurora felt a completeness she had never expected to achieve before her 40th birthday. Yet with great visibility came new challenges, the delicate balance between her growing public profile and the private sanctuary she had built for her sons. The morning after the award ceremony, Aurora found herself fielding calls from major publications seeking profiles not just on her architectural innovations, but on the human interest angle of her single motherhood. Her publicist forwarded requests from television shows wanting the inspirational story of the triplets. "I'm declining all personal profile requests," Aurora instructed her publicist firmly, setting her coffee mug down on her desk. "The work speaks for itself. My children aren't props for public consumption." In the 8 years since their birth, Augustus, Benjamin, and Charles had remained largely shielded from media attention. Aurora had carefully controlled their public exposure, allowing only occasional appearances at carefully selected events. Their schools had strict privacy policies, and the boy's last name, Miles, not Stone, provided additional protection from unwanted connections. At Westridge Academy, where the triplets now attended 2nd grade, Augustus sat in an advanced mathematics class surrounded by 4th graders. His teacher watched in amazement as the 8-year-old solved complex algebraic equations with an ease that defied his age. "This is actually quite simple," Augustus explained to a struggling classmate. "It's just about finding the pattern in the numbers, like predicting market trends." Across the building, Benjamin was causing a similar stir in the art department. His submission to the National Young Artists Competition, a futuristic city design that incorporated living plants into residential towers, had not only won first place but attracted attention from professional architects who couldn't believe it was created by an 8-year-old. "The vegetation serves both aesthetic and practical purposes," Benjamin explained earnestly to his art teacher. "The plants clean the air while providing natural cooling systems for the buildings." Meanwhile, Charles was correcting his history teacher on the construction details of the Empire State Building during a class field trip. "Actually," he said politely, "the construction took exactly 410 days, not about a year, as you mentioned, and they used Indiana limestone for the facade, not marble." The teacher blinked in surprise. "That's correct, Charles. Where did you learn that?" "Volume 3 of American Architectural Landmarks," he replied matter-of-factly. "I read it last month." That evening, Aurora hosted a small dinner at their Tribeca apartment to celebrate the Pritzker Prize. As her key employees and closest friends mingled in the spacious living room, she noticed the triplets huddled together near the bookshelf, whispering intently. "Everything okay?" she asked, approaching them. Augustus straightened his already perfect posture. "Mom, we've been calculating the value of your company based on recent comparable acquisitions in the architectural sector." Aurora suppressed a smile. "And?" "Based on current EBITDA multiples and your proprietary technology portfolio," he continued seriously, "MAI is significantly undervalued at $1 billion. "Financial considerations aside," Benjamin interjected, "we think you should start documenting your design philosophy more comprehensively, for historical purposes." Charles nodded solemnly. "Future architects will study your methodology. It should be properly archived." Aurora looked at her sons, these remarkable, brilliant children, and felt a wave of love so powerful it momentarily overwhelmed her. They were exceptional not just in intelligence but in their awareness of legacy and responsibility. The following Saturday, Aurora gathered the boys for their monthly Giving Day, a tradition she had established to ensure they understood the responsibilities that came with privilege. Today, they were visiting a community center in Queens where MAI had designed an energy-efficient renovation. "Why do we volunteer when we could just donate money?" Augustus asked pragmatically as they rode the subway. "Wouldn't that be more efficient?" Aurora looked at her son thoughtfully. "Money is important, but presence matters too. It's not enough to earn wealth. True value comes from how we use it to help others." Later that week, in her Cape Cod mansion, Eleanor Stone examined a collection of photographs spread across her bed. At 90 years old, her hands trembled slightly, but her mind remained razor-sharp. The photos documented the triplets' growth, images captured discreetly by trusted associates at school events, park outings, and from a careful distance at public appearances. "Madam, your medication," her nurse announced, entering with a tray. Eleanor carefully gathered the photographs. "Schedule a meeting with Ms. Miles next week. There are matters we must discuss while I'm still able." 3 days later, Aurora sat in Eleanor's private sitting room, the elderly woman now confined to a wheelchair but still commanding the space with aristocratic authority. "They'll need to know the truth eventually," Eleanor stated without preamble. "The question is when and how." Aurora sipped her tea, considering. "They're only 8, Eleanor. 8-year-olds with the intellectual capacity of university students," the older woman countered, "and the Stone family name carries both privileges and burdens they should be prepared for." "I've never hidden that they have a father," Aurora replied carefully, "only the circumstances of his rejection." Eleanor's piercing eyes, the same honey color she had passed to her grandson and great-grandsons, held Aurora's gaze. "My lawyers are updating my will. I need your input on certain provisions regarding the boys." In a luxurious penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, Derek Stone hosted an extravagant party aboard his yacht. Though still handsome at 38, fine lines of stress had begun to appear around his eyes, and his once athletic frame showed signs of indulgence. Surrounded by socialites and business associates, he laughed too loudly at mediocre jokes, the strained quality of his enjoyment evident to careful observers. "Another round," he called to the bartender, loosening his designer tie. "We're celebrating." "What exactly are we celebrating, Derek?" asked a board member discreetly. "The Boston waterfront project is only $15 million over budget," Derek replied with forced cheer. "Could have been worse." The following Tuesday, Aurora was reviewing structural plans for Seattle's eco-friendly apartment complex when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message from the Triplets school. Arriving at Westridge Academy 30 minutes later, she found 3 unusually subdued boys waiting in the guidance counselor's office. "Ms. Miles, thank you for coming so quickly," the counselor greeted her. "There was an incident during family history class today." Augustus, always the spokesman, stepped forward. "We were doing family trees, Mom. Everyone was putting 2 sides of their family." Aurora's heart sank. She had known this moment would come eventually, but had hoped for more time to prepare. "Tyler asked why we only had half a family tree," Benjamin continued, his sensitive nature making his voice quaver slightly. "Then Ms. Harrison said everyone has 2 sides of a family." Charles, precise as always, added, "She specifically stated that family trees require information from both maternal and paternal lineages for completion." That evening, after dinner, Aurora gathered the boys in the living room for the conversation she had both prepared for and dreaded. They sat on the plush sectional sofa, 3 identical faces watching her with intelligent expectation. "You asked today about your father's side of the family," she began carefully. "There's more to that story that I've been waiting to share until you were older." "Are we old enough now?" Benjamin asked, leaning forward. Aurora nodded. "Your father comes from a prominent family. The reason we don't discuss that side of your heritage is because he made choices that indicated he wasn't ready or willing to be your father." "What kind of choices?" Augustus asked directly. Aurora chose her words with precision. "When I told him I was pregnant with you 3, he chose not to be part of our lives. That choice reflects on him, not on you." "Did he not want us?" Benjamin's voice was small, his artistic soul most vulnerable to the pain of rejection. Aurora moved to sit between them, pulling Benjamin close. "He never had the chance to know you, and that's his greatest loss, not yours." Charles, always seeking concrete information, pressed further. "What's his name? What does he do?" "Those are details for another conversation," Aurora replied firmly. "What's important now is that you understand that families take many forms, and ours is perfect exactly as it is." Later that night, after tucking the boys into bed, Aurora carefully stored away their incomplete family tree projects. As she closed the folder, her phone chimed with a text from Eleanor. "He's getting desperate. Stone Enterprises lost the Chicago contract today. The board is questioning his leadership." While Aurora filed away the incomplete family trees, she couldn't have imagined that in less than a year the Stone name would appear in headlines alongside hers, in a confrontation no one could have predicted. While Aurora filed away the incomplete family trees, she couldn't have imagined that in less than a year the Stone name would appear in headlines alongside hers, in a confrontation no one could have predicted. The catalyst for this inevitable collision was already in motion, set into play by forces beyond her control. Eleanor Stone's health had been declining steadily since the Pritzker ceremony. The formidable matriarch, who had secretly shaped the destiny of her great-grandsons from the shadows, now faced her own mortality with the same strategic foresight she'd applied to business decisions throughout her 90 years. On a crisp autumn morning, Aurora received an urgent call from Eleanor's private nurse. "Ms. Miles, Mrs. Stone is requesting your presence immediately. Her condition has worsened overnight." Within 2 hours, Aurora was seated beside Eleanor's ornate four-poster bed in the master suite of her Cape Cod mansion. Medical equipment created a stark contrast against the antique furnishings, beeping softly in the otherwise silent room. "We must finalize arrangements," Eleanor stated without preamble, her voice frail but her mind evidently clear. "My time grows short." Aurora reached for the elderly woman's hand, surprised by how light and papery it felt. "What arrangements do you mean, Eleanor?" The old woman's honey-colored eyes, the same shade shared by her grandson and great-grandsons, fixed on Aurora with startling intensity. "I'm leaving 51% of Stone Enterprises to you and the boys." Aurora withdrew her hand in shock. "That's impossible. Derek would never allow it." "Derek hasn't allowed many things that have happened nonetheless," Eleanor replied with a hint of her former sharpness. "My legal team has prepared everything. The documentation is ironclad." A distinguished silver-haired attorney stepped forward from the corner of the room. "Mrs. Stone has been methodically documenting her grandson's mismanagement for 9 years, Ms. Miles. The board will have no legal grounds to contest her decision, though they will certainly try." "This will create a massive legal battle," Aurora protested. "Derek will fight this with everything he has." A ghost of a smile crossed Eleanor's lined face. "Let him try. I've spent 9 years watching you build something magnificent from nothing while Derek has squandered what took generations to build. The Cape Cod property will also transfer to you and the boys. It's been in the Stone family for 150 years. Aurora stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the manicured grounds sloping down to the private beach. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, identity, and the eventual collision of two worlds she had fought to keep separate. "The boys don't even know who their father is yet," she said quietly. "This would force a revelation I'm not sure they're ready for." Eleanor's voice softened. "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Mine certainly were." That evening, as Aurora returned to Manhattan, her phone rang with news that under different circumstances would have been purely celebratory. The head of Boston's Urban Development Commission was calling personally. "Ms. Miles, we're pleased to inform you that Miles Architectural Innovation has been selected for the historic port revitalization project. The contract value is $780 million. Aurora's grip tightened on the phone. Boston. The city Derek had said wasn't ready for her. The irony wasn't lost on her. "The committee was particularly impressed with your commitment to preserving historical elements while implementing cutting-edge sustainability," the commissioner continued. "This will be the largest urban renewal project in Boston's history." As the Tribeca apartment elevator ascended, Aurora composed herself. The boys would be waiting with their nanny, and they were remarkably perceptive to her emotional states. This evening required normalcy, not hints of the seismic shifts occurring beneath the surface of their lives. True to form, the triplets were engaged in their typical activities when she entered. Augustus was using his tablet to track stock market movements. Benjamin was sketching what appeared to be a waterfront promenade, and Charles was absorbed in a historical text about Boston's architectural evolution. "Mom!" Benjamin was the first to look up. "I've been designing harbors all day. I didn't even know you were bidding on a port project." Aurora set down her briefcase, momentarily startled. "How did you—" "Charles found an article about potential bidders for the Boston Port project," Augustus explained matter-of-factly. "We calculated that MAI had a 78% chance of securing it based on your recent portfolio and the evaluation criteria." Aurora looked at her sons, these extraordinary children who somehow always seemed one step ahead. "We need to talk about a trip to Boston soon. The 3 of you will be coming with me to see the site." Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Aurora discovered what had prompted their harbor research. Charles's tablet history showed searches for Derek Stone Boston, Stone Enterprises headquarters, and Stone family history. Her heart sank. Their curiosity was natural, but the timing couldn't be more precarious. The following morning, the triplets sat huddled around Augustus's computer in his bedroom, door slightly ajar as they conducted their secret investigation. "Look at this old picture from the Boston Business Journal," Charles whispered, pointing at the screen. "It's from 9 years ago." The photograph showed a younger Derek Stone at a charity gala, his arm around a woman whose face had been partially cropped from the frame, but enough was visible to recognize Aurora's profile. "Look at his eyes," Charles continued. "They're exactly like ours." Augustus's analytical mind immediately made the connection. "This was taken around the time Mom would have been pregnant with us. The article says he was engaged to be married." "To Mom?" Benjamin asked, eyes wide. "The timing fits," Augustus confirmed, ever the mathematician. "And look at this more recent photo. The genetic markers are unmistakable. The eye shape, the jawline. We have his features, but Mom's coloring." Their investigation was interrupted by the sound of Aurora's home office door opening. They quickly switched screens to a math game before she could discover their research. Meanwhile, at MAI headquarters, Aurora reviewed the preliminary plans for the Boston Port project, trying to focus on work rather than the personal complications looming on the horizon. Her executive team presented innovative approaches for preserving the historical wharves while implementing renewable energy systems throughout the development. "This project will transform Boston's relationship with its waterfront," her lead designer explained, "and it positions MAI as the definitive leader in large-scale sustainable urban renewal." Aurora nodded, mentally calculating how to structure the project phases around the triplets' school schedule. The Boston work would require significant time on site, which meant either bringing the boys with her or spending time apart, neither option ideal with the coming upheaval. Her contemplation was interrupted by her private line ringing, a number few people possessed. "Ms. Miles," the grave voice began, "this is Edward Tompkins of Tompkins and Associates. I regret to inform you that Eleanor Stone passed away peacefully this morning." Aurora closed her eyes, grief washing over her. Despite their unconventional relationship, Eleanor had been her ally, her children's great-grandmother, and in many ways, her mentor. "She left explicit instructions," Tompkins continued. "There's a sealed letter to be delivered to you personally, to be opened only at a specific time." "When?" Aurora asked. "At the Sustainable Innovation Gala next week." She was most insistent about the timing. After the call ended, Aurora sat motionless at her desk, the weight of what was coming settling on her shoulders. Eleanor was gone. The only person who had bridged the worlds of Stone and Miles was no longer there to guide the inevitable collision. Her assistant knocked gently before entering. "The invitation to the Sustainable Innovation Gala just arrived. You're receiving the main award for the Boston project design." Aurora took the embossed envelope, another piece falling into place. "Thank you. Please clear my calendar for the evening and arrange for 3 additional seats." "For the boys?" her assistant asked, surprised. This would be their first major public appearance. "Yes," Aurora confirmed. "It's time." That weekend, Aurora took the triplets shopping for their first formal suits, 3 identical Burberry ensembles that made them look like miniature executives. As the tailor made final adjustments, she noticed the boys exchanging meaningful glances, their private communication system at work. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Augustus, always their spokesman, squared his shoulders. "We're ready for this, Mom. We understand it's important." Something in his tone suggested they understood more than she had told them, but Aurora chose not to press. The coming days would reveal enough truths without forcing premature conversations. On the morning of the gala, Aurora's phone chimed with a message from Derek's executive assistant, an innocuous business communication requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration between MAI and Stone Enterprises. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Word of the Boston contract had clearly reached him. As her driver navigated toward Trump Tower that evening, Aurora, in her striking red Valentino gown and the triplets impeccably dressed in their matching suits, her phone lit up with the notification she had been dreading, the official legal document from Tompkins and Associates regarding Eleanor's will. "Any problems, Mom?" Augustus asked, noticing her expression change as she read the notification. "No, sweetheart, just business," she replied, tucking the phone away. "Remember, tonight is important. You three are Miles' men, and that means excellence." As the car pulled up to the red carpet, photographers immediately swarmed, recognizing Aurora but showing particular interest in the three identical boys making their public debut. Camera flashes exploded as Aurora stepped out confidently, her sons moving with surprising poise beside her. What she couldn't know was that inside the grand ballroom, Derek Stone was midway through presenting his recovery plan for Stone Enterprises to skeptical shareholders, unaware that his past was about to walk through the door in triplicate form. While Aurora prepared to walk the red carpet with her sons, she didn't know that in less than an hour, the Trump Tower ballroom would become the stage for the confrontation that would forever change the destinies of the Miles and Stone families. While Aurora prepared to walk the red carpet with her sons, she didn't know that in less than an hour, the Trump Tower ballroom would become the stage for the confrontation that would forever change the destinies of the Miles and Stone families. Smoothing her crimson Valentino gown, she bent down to adjust Benjamin's bow tie one last time. "Remember, whatever happens tonight, we are family," she whispered to her boys. "Stand tall, speak clearly, and remember everything we've practiced." The triplets nodded in perfect synchronicity, their honey-colored eyes, so unmistakably Stone, glinting with intelligence beyond their years. Augustus straightened his already impeccable posture. Benjamin touched the architectural sketch he'd tucked into his pocket for courage, and Charles recited historical facts about Trump Tower under his breath to calm his nerves. Inside the car, Aurora opened the sealed envelope from Tompkins and Associates. Eleanor's final letter was characteristically direct. "My dear Aurora, tonight changes everything. I've documented Derek's mismanagement meticulously for 9 years. The enclosed financial reports demonstrate that MAI has surpassed Stone Enterprises in both valuation and stability. When Derek sees his sons tonight, remember that you hold all the power now. Use it wisely. With respect and faith in your judgment, Eleanor Stone." Aurora's hands trembled slightly as she returned the papers to the envelope. The meticulous documentation included photographs of the boys throughout the years, evidence of Eleanor's secret visits, and devastating financial analyses comparing Derek's declining empire to Aurora's ascending one. Eleanor had created an ironclad case that would make it nearly impossible for Derek to contest her will. "Is that about us, Mom?" Charles asked, noticing the Stone family crest on the envelope's seal. "Yes," Aurora answered honestly. "Tonight you'll learn more about your father's family. Are you ready for that?" 3 identical nods answered her. They had clearly suspected, perhaps known, more than she'd realized. Inside Trump Tower's grand ballroom, Derek Stone stood on the raised platform, sweat beading at his temples despite the perfectly controlled temperature. His once athletic frame had softened, his tailored Tom Ford suit working overtime to disguise the evidence of too many stress-fueled dinners and drinks. "And with these strategic adjustments," he continued, voice projecting false confidence to the room of increasingly skeptical investors, "I can guarantee that Stone Enterprises will reclaim its dominant position in the northeastern real estate market within the next—" Derek's voice faltered as he noticed a sudden shift in the audience. Heads turned toward the entrance, conversations halted mid-sentence, and a ripple of murmurs spread across the ballroom like wind through tall grass. Following the direction of their gazes, he turned toward the main doors. The water glass in his hand slipped through suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on the stage with a crash that echoed throughout the now silent room. Aurora Miles, the woman he had humiliated 9 years earlier, stood in the doorway like an avenging goddess. Her red gown accentuated her dark skin and contrasted dramatically with the navy blue suits of the 3 identical boys accompanying her. boys with unmistakable stone eyes. His eyes, staring directly at him with undisguised curiosity. As I was saying, Derek attempted to continue, but his voice cracked traitorously. The audience had already lost interest in his failing company's recovery plan. All attention had shifted to Aurora Miles, the architectural revolutionary whose name regularly appeared in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. An event coordinator rushed to Aurora's side, visibly flustered by the scheduling conflict. "Ms. Miles, it's an honor to have you here," he said, lowering his voice. "Mr. Stone's presentation is nearly complete, and then we can proceed with the gala where you'll receive the main award." Derek stumbled through the remainder of his presentation, the words meaningless even to himself as his eyes repeatedly returned to the three boys who were now seated at a prominent table near the front. His mind raced, calculating dates and possibilities, each conclusion more devastating than the last. When the polite, tepid applause finally released him from his purgatory on stage, Derek moved through the crowd like a sleepwalker, drawn inexorably toward Aurora. She stood chatting with the mayor, her posture relaxed and confident, so different from the young, insecure woman he had discarded. "Aurora," he managed when he finally reached her, the name unfamiliar on his tongue after so many years. "I didn't know you would be here." "Mr. Stone," she replied with formal coolness, as though addressing a stranger. "I'm here to receive the award for the Boston Port Revitalization Project. Ironically, it seems the city was ready for me after all." The pointed reference to his cruel dismissal hit its mark. Derek flinched visibly, his gaze darting again to the three boys now conversing with a well-known architectural critic, their vocabulary and insights clearly well beyond their years. Before Derek could respond, an elderly gentleman in an impeccable suit approached, carrying an envelope bearing the Stone family crest. "Ms. Miles, I'm Edward Tompkins, legal representative for the late Eleanor Stone. She left explicit instructions to deliver this document to you tonight." Derek stared in bewilderment at the interaction. "You knew my grandmother?" Aurora's eyes held his for a measured moment. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Mr. Stone. Unlike some family members, she recognized value where others failed to see it." The master of ceremonies interrupted their charged exchange, announcing that guests should take their seats as the award presentation was about to begin. Derek found himself directed to a front-row seat, directly facing the podium where Aurora would soon stand. The presenter's introduction was glowing. "Aurora Miles has revolutionized sustainable architecture, transforming not just buildings, but entire communities. Her Boston Port revitalization will create 3,500 jobs while reducing the area's carbon footprint by 60%. On stage, Aurora spoke eloquently about inclusive architecture and sustainable design. Her occasional glances toward Derek carried no hatred, only a serene confidence that somehow cut deeper than any anger could have. "Architecture at its best doesn't exclude or reject," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "It embraces, supports, and elevates everyone who interacts with it." From his front row seat, Derek noticed the three boys watching their mother with unmistakable pride. Their expressions, their posture, even their mannerisms reflected both Aurora's dignified presence and, undeniably, his own family traits. During the reception that followed, Derek finally managed to approach Aurora again as she accepted congratulations from industry leaders. The boys were across the room, charmingly engaged in conversation with the mayor of New York, who was visibly impressed by their precocious understanding of urban development. "They're my sons, aren't they?" Derek asked quietly, his voice strained. Aurora confirmed, her tone matter-of-fact. "Augustus, Benjamin, and Charles Miles. And yes, biologically they share your DNA." "Why did you never tell me?" Aurora met his gaze directly, her eyes holding the same intensity he remembered from years ago, but now tempered with unshakable self-assurance. "You said I was an obstacle to your legacy, that I wasn't enough for the Stone dynasty. Why would I offer my children to someone who had already rejected them before they were even born?" At that moment, Edward Tompkins approached again, now accompanied by 2 additional attorneys and 3 Stone Enterprises board members. "Ms. Miles, I believe now would be appropriate to open Mrs. Stone's envelope as the primary interested parties are present." With Aurora's permission, the attorney broke the seal and read aloud, "I, Eleanor Stone of sound mind, hereby leave 51% of Stone Enterprises shares and the Cape Cod property to Aurora Miles, who has demonstrated the true entrepreneurial spirit and vision that has always defined our family. For 9 years, I have investigated and followed her remarkable rise, confirming she is the ideal guardian of the Stone legacy through my great-grandsons. To my grandson Derek, I leave the decision in Aurora's hands. If she deems you worthy of knowing your children and maintaining your position in the company." The silence that followed was absolute. Stone Enterprises board members looked from Derek to Aurora in shocked disbelief. Reporters present to cover the architecture award suddenly realized they were witnessing something far more significant. "Impossible," Derek stammered. "My grandmother wouldn't—" "Your grandmother visited your sons regularly for 9 years," Aurora interrupted calmly. "While you were building your legacy based on appearances, she secretly funded the start of my company and established an educational trust for your great-grandsons." The financial implications were staggering. Miles' architectural innovation now surpassed Stone Enterprises in value. Aurora hadn't merely recovered, she had completely eclipsed the Stone fortune. "We need to talk privately," Derek pleaded, his composed facade crumbling. "We have nothing to discuss in private that can't be said here," Aurora replied evenly. "I no longer fear shadows, Mr. Stone." While the ballroom erupted in hushed conversations and camera flashes, Aurora had no idea that her true victory wouldn't be humiliating Derek, but rather freeing herself and him from the chains of a past that still bound them both. The morning after the gala, Aurora woke before dawn, her mind racing with the implications of what had transpired. The confrontation at Trump Tower had unleashed forces that would reshape both families forever. She slipped quietly from bed, careful not to wake the boys who had finally fallen asleep long past midnight, their young minds buzzing with questions after witnessing the extraordinary scene. In the kitchen of her Tribeca apartment, Aurora prepared coffee and opened her laptop. The Wall Street Journal's homepage confirmed her expectation. "Stone Empire changes hands. Unexpected heiress takes control" dominated the front page. Beside it, a striking photo contrasted Aurora and the triplets with Derek's defeated exit from Trump Tower. Her phone hadn't stopped vibrating since they'd left the gala. Investment banks, competing architectural firms, and journalists all demanded statements about the dramatic shift in power. Aurora silenced them all, knowing that her first and most important conversation needed to be with her sons. The soft padding of feet on hardwood announced their approach. The triplets entered the kitchen together, already dressed in matching weekend attire, their expressions uncharacteristically solemn. "Good morning," Aurora said, closing her laptop. "I think we have some things to talk about." Augustus, ever the pragmatist, took the lead. "The man from last night, Derek Stone, he's our biological father, isn't he?" Aurora nodded, impressed, but not surprised by their directness. "Yes. And until yesterday, he didn't know about you." "Why didn't he know about us, Mom?" Benjamin's artistic sensitivity made his voice quaver slightly. Aurora gestured for them to sit at the kitchen island. She had rehearsed this conversation countless times over the years, yet now that the moment had arrived, the carefully prepared script felt inadequate. 9 years ago, Derek made choices that showed he wasn't ready to be a father, she began carefully. When I told him I was pregnant, his response made it clear that he didn't want to be part of our lives. "He rejected us before we were even born?" Charles asked, his historian's mind already piecing together the timeline. "He rejected the idea of us," Aurora clarified, wanting to be precise. "He never knew you as individuals. That's an important distinction." Benjamin, always the most emotionally perceptive, studied his mother's face. He hurt you badly, didn't he? Aurora considered deflecting but chose honesty instead. Yes, but that pain led me to build something wonderful. Our family, our company, our life together. He looked sad last night, Charles observed, ever attentive to human details despite his focus on facts and figures. Sometimes people only value what they've lost after it's gone, Aurora replied. That's a hard lesson many people learn too late. The conversation continued through breakfast, the boys asking increasingly specific questions about Derek, the Stone family, and what Eleanor's will meant for their future. Aurora answered each query honestly, shielding them from the cruelest details while respecting their intelligence too much to offer platitudes. Meanwhile, across town, the Stone Enterprises Board of Directors convened an emergency session. The conference room buzzed with tension as executives whispered among themselves, speculation running rampant about the previous night's revelations. Derek sat alone at the head of the table, his usual bravado replaced by a shell-shocked demeanor. The Wall Street Journal lay before him, Aurora's triumphant image a silent accusation. 9 years ago, he had discarded her as mediocre and without value. Now she controlled his family's legacy. The legal team has reviewed Mrs. Stone's will, announced the chief counsel, entering with a stack of documents. It appears to be legally sound. Mrs. Stone spent years documenting her decision-making process and Mr. Stone's business judgments. Meaning what exactly? Demanded a senior board member. Meaning that contesting the will would likely be futile and potentially damaging, the lawyer replied grimly. Mrs. Stone compiled extensive evidence of questionable business decisions, declined opportunities, and, he glanced uncomfortably at Derek, personal conduct that would become public record in any legal challenge. As the implications sank in, Derek's phone chimed with a text from Vanessa Huntington, his Connecticut blue blood fiancée. My father has seen the news. The engagement is off. Do not contact me again. Within hours, the personal rejection became professional as well. 3 major clients called to withdraw from pending projects, citing alignment with corporate values and public perception concerns. Derek's assistant delivered a growing stack of cancellation notices, each one representing millions in lost revenue. By mid-afternoon, Derek's social media team delivered more bad news. Derek Stone is Over party was trending nationwide, with users sharing links to the gala video and adding captions about karma and poetic justice. In her office at MAI headquarters, Aurora conducted a video conference with her executive team, her composure a stark contrast to the chaos engulfing Stone Enterprises. Nothing changes with our operations, she informed them clearly. Stone Enterprises will continue under its current management structure for now, though we'll be implementing significant policy changes regarding sustainable practices and diversity initiatives. And the boys? Asked her chief operating officer, who had watched the triplets grow up alongside the company. They will continue their education and normal routines, Aurora replied firmly. Their well-being remains my primary concern through this transition. 1 week after the gala, Derek appeared in the MAI building lobby, 3 carefully wrapped gifts in his arms. He looked disheveled despite his expensive suit, his face haggard from sleepless nights. I'm here to see Aurora Miles, he told the receptionist, who recognized him immediately. Do you have an appointment, Mr. Stone? She asked, though they both knew he didn't. Please, he said, his voice lacking its customary arrogance. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. When Aurora emerged from the elevator, her tailored Chanel suit and confident stride presented a stark contrast to Derek's diminished presence. The employees in the lobby pretended not to watch the encounter between the architectural visionary and the fallen heir. Aurora, please, Derek began, stepping forward with the presents. 5 minutes. I want to meet my sons. Aurora regarded him steadily, her expression neither angry nor triumphant, simply resolute. They aren't your sons, Derek. A father is more than DNA. "I can change," he insisted. "I want to be part of their lives. I can offer—" "What?" Aurora interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "Money? They each have educational trusts worth $40 million. Connections? My projects have introduced them to presidents and prime ministers. The Stone name? They've already built their own legacy as Miles." Derek stared at the woman before him, so different from the young, insecure architect he had discarded. There was no hatred in her eyes, only an indifference that cut deeper than any accusation could have. "What do you want from me, then?" he finally asked, defeated. "Absolutely nothing," Aurora replied, the simplicity of her answer devastating in its completeness. "That's the beauty of it, Derek. I've built a life that doesn't need you in any aspect." 2 weeks later, Aurora met with the legal team in her office, her decision finalized after careful consideration and conversations with the boys. "I'll retain the 51% stake, but I have no interest in directly managing Stone Enterprises," she declared. "Derek may maintain his CEO position, provided he implements the changes I've stipulated, 35% of profits directed to affordable housing projects for the next 20 years, and complete diversification of the board and executive team." "And the children?" the lawyer inquired. "Derek may meet them gradually in supervised settings if they express interest," Aurora replied. "The final decision will always remain theirs." After the lawyers departed, Aurora opened Eleanor's final gift, 3 gold pocket watches, Stone family heirlooms passed down for generations, each engraved with one of the boys' names. The following day, Aurora and the triplets walked along the private beach at the Cape Cod property that now belonged to them. In the distance, the Stone mansion stood as it had for 150 years, awaiting its new family. "What will we do with the house, Mom?" Augustus asked practically. "We'll transform it," Aurora replied with a smile, "just as we transformed our story." Meanwhile, in his empty Boston penthouse, Derek Stone stared out at the city that he had once claimed wasn't ready for Aurora. The same city now celebrating her revolutionary project with billboards bearing her face. In his hands, he held the engagement ring he had thrown to the floor 9 years earlier, purchased at an anonymous auction for 10 times its original value. In his abandoned office, the newspaper photo of 3 smiling boys seemed to watch him, the Stone legacy he had rejected, and that now moved forward without him. Not through vengeance, but through transcendence. Not through hatred, but through pure indifference to his existence. And that, Derek realized, was the most just punishment he could have received. In his abandoned office, Derek stared at the newspaper photo of 3 smiling boys, the Stone legacy he had rejected that now moved forward without him. Not through vengeance, but through transcendence. Not through hatred, but through pure indifference to his existence. And that, Derek realized, was the most just punishment he could have received. Aurora faced her most challenging decision yet: how to allow Derek into his sons' lives without compromising everything she had built. After sleepless nights weighing the complex ethics of the situation, she scheduled a consultation with Dr. Elaine Winters, a renowned family therapist specializing in unusual reunification cases. "There's no precedent for this specific situation," Dr. Winters acknowledged after Aurora explained the full history. "But children are remarkably adaptable when given agency in these decisions." "They're only 8, Aurora replied, twisting her watchband nervously. "How do I protect them emotionally while still allowing them to know their heritage?" "By doing exactly what you've always done, respecting their intelligence while maintaining appropriate boundaries." Dr. Winters leaned forward. "Have you asked them what they want?" That evening, Aurora gathered the triplets in their spacious living room. The boys sat on the sectional sofa, their expressions serious beyond their years. "Derek Stone has asked to meet you," she began directly. "As your mother, I would support whatever decision you make about this. It's entirely your choice." The boys exchanged their silent, identical glances. the private communication system they had perfected since infancy. Augustus spoke first, practical as always. "I'm curious about how he runs businesses, even failing ones. There might be valuable lessons in his mistakes." Benjamin looked more hesitant. "Does he really want to know us, or just because we're suddenly valuable to him?" "A valid question," Aurora acknowledged. "I don't know his true motivations. We can only judge by his actions going forward." Charles, ever the historian, added, "Family connections matter in understanding our complete story. I'd like to meet him, but cautiously." Aurora nodded, touched by their thoughtfulness. "Then we'll arrange a supervised meeting. On your terms, not his." 3 days later, Derek waited nervously on a bench in Central Park, the neutral location Aurora had specified. He had arrived 30 minutes early, obsessively straightening his tie and rehearsing what to say. When Aurora appeared walking down the path with 3 identical boys in matching navy sweaters, his hands began to tremble. "Remember," Aurora instructed the triplets quietly, "you can end this meeting anytime you wish. Just say the word." As they approached, Derek stood awkwardly, clutching 3 wrapped packages. 9 years of imagined encounters had left him utterly unprepared for the reality of seeing these miniature versions of himself, with Aurora's determination evident in their posture. "Hello?" he managed, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Augustus stepped forward first, extending his hand formally. "Hello, Mr. Stone. I'm Augustus Miles." Derek shook the small hand, amazed by the firm grip. Benjamin and Charles followed with similar introductions, though Benjamin hung back slightly, more reserved than his brothers. "I brought you something," Derek said, offering the gifts. Each boy accepted a package with polite thanks, but made no move to open them. "Perhaps later," Aurora suggested smoothly, sitting on a nearby bench where she could observe without interfering. The initial conversation was stilted, with Derek asking standard questions about school and interests. The breakthrough came when he mentioned the Boston waterfront project. "Mom's design increases public access by 42% while preserving 93% of the historical structures," Charles stated with precision. "The economic model is brilliant," Augustus added. "The sustainability features will recoup their cost in 7 years, not 15 as initially projected." Derek looked genuinely impressed. "You understand all that?" "Mom explains her projects to us," Benjamin said simply. "She believes in transparency." "You have your mother's intelligence," Derek observed, then added more softly, "but you have my mother's eyes." Benjamin studied him curiously. "Great-grandmother Eleanor visited us sometimes. She said the same thing." As the meeting concluded, Charles asked the question that clearly weighed on all 3 boys. "Why did you say Boston wasn't ready for our mother?" The directness of the question left Derek speechless for a moment. "I was wrong," he finally admitted, "about many things." 1 month after the initial meeting, Aurora implemented her first changes at Stone Enterprises. The boardroom that had once been filled exclusively with older white men now included 2 women of color, an environmental scientist, and an urban housing advocate. Derek watched from the head of the table as Aurora presented her vision for transforming the company. "Stone Enterprises won't merely survive," she explained, displaying projections on the screen. "It will become the model that the real estate industry needs to follow: equitable, sustainable, and forward-thinking. These profit allocations for affordable housing are unprecedented," protested one longtime board member. "So is having the most innovative architectural mind of our generation as majority shareholder," Derek responded, surprising everyone with his support. "The old methods weren't working. It's time to listen to new ideas." After the meeting, Derek approached Aurora privately. "Thank you for not removing me as CEO. Most people would have." "This isn't about revenge," Aurora replied evenly. "It's about building something meaningful. You have skills that can be valuable if directed properly." "How did you do all this?" he asked, gesturing vaguely to encompass her success. "How did you build an empire while raising 3 children alone?" Aurora's expression softened slightly. "I didn't have a choice. You gave me the greatest gift without realizing it, the necessity to prove my worth." As months passed, Derek gradually earned limited trust with the triplets. The supervised visits became less formal, moving from public parks to museums and eventually to occasional dinners at neutral restaurants. Augustus particularly enjoyed discussing business strategy, often challenging Derek's assumptions with surprisingly sophisticated analyses. The most significant breakthrough came when Benjamin, the most hesitant of the 3, allowed Derek to see his architectural sketches during a visit to the Museum of Modern Art. "These are extraordinary," Derek said, genuinely amazed by the innovative designs. "You've inherited your mother's vision." "And perhaps some of your ambition," Benjamin replied carefully, the first acknowledgement of their shared traits. 6 months after the gala revelation, Aurora stood on the sweeping lawn of the Cape Cod estate, now transformed into the Eleanor Stone Center for Architectural Innovation. The historic mansion had been meticulously renovated, its stately rooms converted into classrooms, design studios, and residence spaces for young architects from underrepresented communities. "Mom, the first students are arriving," Charles called excitedly, pointing to a shuttle bus coming up the long driveway. The inaugural class of 20 scholarship recipients, talented young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds, would spend the next year learning under master architects while developing sustainable housing solutions for their communities. During the opening ceremony, Aurora addressed the gathered crowd of industry leaders, educators, and press. "We build more than buildings. We build futures, legacies, and bridges across divides that once seemed unbridgeable." From the side of the gathering, Derek watched with complex emotions. He had been invited not as CEO of Stone Enterprises but as a supporter of the program, having volunteered to mentor students on the business aspects of architecture. This role, using his privilege to elevate others rather than himself, had become unexpectedly fulfilling. That evening, as sunset painted the Cape Cod sky in brilliant orange and pink, Aurora stood on the mansion's deck watching her sons play tag on the beach. Derek sat at a respectful distance, occasionally answering Augustus's questions about property valuations in the area. This wasn't the traditional family she had once envisioned, but something new and perhaps stronger, forged through adversity and built on hard-earned respect rather than obligation. The triplets now understood their complete heritage, carrying the determination of their mother and the business acumen of the Stone lineage, without the entitlement that had been Derek's downfall. They moved between both worlds with remarkable ease, equally comfortable in the elite spaces of power and in the community centers where their mother's designs served everyday people. As the golden light faded over Cape Cod, Aurora finally understood that her true revenge hadn't been destroying Derek Stone but building something so extraordinary that even he had to acknowledge what he had once dismissed. She had always been more than enough. She was exceptional. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.